They handed out gifts to everyone in the family, engraved watches for the sons, custom necklaces for the daughters. Even the grandkids got handwritten letters and little keepsakes. I stood there holding my daughter's hand, waiting, smiling politely like I'd been trained to. And then Sandra, my father-in-law's wife, turned to me, looked me right in the eye, and said, "There's nothing for you. You're not real family." Then she handed me a tray and told me to start passing out drinks. I thought maybe it was a joke. Maybe someone was going to laugh and say, "Gotcha." But no one did. Everyone just let it happen. Even Marcus, my husband, just stood there in shock. My daughter looked up at me, confused. I felt the heat rising to my face. I wanted to cry, scream, disappear, anything but stand there and be invisible again. I almost left. I was halfway to the door when I heard Harold, my father-in-law, pick up the microphone. He cleared his throat and said, "Actually, there's one thing I saved for last." And in that moment, everything changed. The morning of the party, I stood in front of the mirror for longer than I needed to. Not because I was worried about how I looked, but because I needed to breathe. I adjusted my dress, checked my makeup, and reminded myself again that today was not about me. It was Harold's day. 40 years as a firefighter, retiring with honor. He deserved every second of this celebration. Still, I felt the weight pressing on my chest. It wasn't nerves, it was history. I had never really belonged in the Green family, not in the way that counts. From the start, Sandra made sure I understood my place. She never said it outright, not until today, but it was always there. The way she looked past me at holidays. The way she gave Marcus invitations to family events and told him to pass it along. The way she corrected me when I called Harold Dad, saying, "He has children of his own, dear." Marcus told me not to take it personally. He said she was cold with everyone. But that wasn't true. I saw how she smiled at his siblings, how she hugged her daughters, how she gushed over Ashley's husband when he got promoted. It wasn't everyone, it was just me. The only one who never made me feel like an outsider was Harold. He wasn't a loud man, but he noticed things. He remembered my birthday. He helped fix the faucet in our first apartment. He showed Maya how to bait a hook and called her my little spark plug. It was quiet kindness, but it mattered more than he probably knew. That morning, I had finished a scrapbook for him. I had worked on it for weeks. I filled it with pictures of Maya and Harold at the lake, in the garden, on the couch, watching football. I added drawings Maya had made for him and little notes she dictated for me to write. At the end, I wrote a letter of my own. I thanked him for treating me like I was worth knowing, for making room for me in a family that never really opened the door. I didn't tell Marcus about the letter. I wanted it to be between Harold and me. As we got ready to leave, Maya bounced around the living room in her sparkly shoes. "Do you think Grandpa will cry when he sees the book?" "Maybe," I said, smiling, but happy tears. "Can I give it to him?" "You and me together," I said. "It's from both of us." The event was being held at a large banquet hall that Sandra had rented out. Dozens of family members and friends had flown in. Tables were decorated with red and gold, the colors of Harold's old firehouse. There were photo collages, a projection screen showing slides of his career, and a buffet that stretched across an entire wall. We arrived early. Marcus went off to help his brothers with the slideshow. I stayed with Maya, holding her hand, greeting people I barely knew. I noticed right away that no one asked me how I was. They greeted Maya with hugs and smiles, but I was the afterthought, the shadow behind the child. I had gotten used to it, but it still stung. Sandra was in her element, giving directions, overseeing details, chatting with guests like she was running for office. When she passed me, she gave me a tight smile and said, "Try to keep Maya from smudging the tablecloths, okay?" I nodded and looked down at my daughter, who was doing nothing but standing beside me quietly. It would have been easier to stay home, but I came for Harold. I kept thinking about something my mother used to say. Some people will never see your worth, but the right ones don't need to be convinced. My mother passed away before she got to meet Marcus or Maya, but I think she would have liked Harold. He reminded me of her in that way. He didn't talk much about love, but you could feel it when he was in the room. As the hall began to fill and the celebration kicked off, I held Maya's hand tighter. I looked around at all the people who seemed to fit so easily in this world, and I wondered if today would be any different. I told myself it didn't matter, but part of me still hoped. The speeches started after lunch. Harold's best friend from the firehouse told stories that had people laughing and wiping their eyes. His captain shared a heartfelt tribute about Harold pulling a child out of a burning building 25 years ago, and how he never talked about it like he was a hero. Then Marcus stepped up to say a few words, and for a moment I forgot about everything else. He spoke with pride, and even though he didn't mention me by name, I felt a flicker of connection when he said, "Dad taught me that the strongest men are the quiet ones, the ones who show up without needing credit." The audience applauded. Sandra clapped extra hard, as if the moment belonged to her. Then the music softened and a long table was wheeled out to the front of the room. On it were dozens of carefully wrapped packages, labeled with names written in gold ink. Sandra stepped up to the microphone, her smile stretched wide, proud and polished. "We wanted to do something special," she said, "to honor the people who stood beside Harold during all these years, because behind every strong man is a strong family, and today we celebrate all of you." A few people in the audience stood to clap. I stayed seated, holding Maya close. I watched Sandra begin to call names. Each of Harold's sons walked up to receive a gift. Engraved watches, presented in oak boxes, each one with a note inside. "For your leadership," Sandra read aloud as she handed one to Marcus. "For carrying the green name with pride." Then the daughters. Each woman received a gold necklace with a fire emblem charm. Sandra hugged them, whispered something in their ears, posed for photos. Her own daughter, Ashley, got a louder round of applause than the rest, then the grandchildren. One by one, they were given handwritten letters from Harold, printed and framed. Some had small trinkets taped to the backs, coins, badges, bookmarks from Harold's old Bible, personal touches, thoughtful things. Maya watched with excitement. Her legs swung beneath the chair. "That's so cool," she said. "I think I'll get one too." I squeezed her hand, not wanting to say anything yet. I had no idea if Harold remembered to include her, but I hoped. He always made an effort. Sandra stood up straight, clapped her hands once for attention, and said, "And that concludes the gifting. Let's give one more round of applause to our hero, Harold Green." People cheered. The room erupted with appreciation. Maya's face fell. She looked confused. My heart dropped. I waited a few more seconds, thinking maybe there had been a mistake. Maybe they had forgotten someone. Maybe they would realize Maya was missing from the list, that I was missing. Then Sandra turned to me. Her face changed. The warm smile disappeared. She looked at me the way a hostess looks at a server who forgot to refill a drink. She picked up a tray from a nearby table, stepped down off the platform, and walked straight toward me. "Here," she said, shoving the tray into my hands. "Make yourself useful. Start passing these out." I didn't move. The tray was cold and metallic. On it were 10 glasses of champagne, untouched. I looked around the room. No one said anything. Some people looked away. A few shifted in their chairs. Most avoided eye contact. I felt heat rise to my face, spreading across my cheeks like a burn. I glanced at Marcus. He looked stunned, caught mid-clap. His mouth opened slightly, but he didn't say anything, didn't move. Maya looked up at me and asked, "Mommy, didn't we get anything?" I crouched beside her and whispered, "It's fine, sweetheart, it doesn't matter." But it did matter. I stood, still holding the tray, and handed it to a passing waiter without a word. Then I turned and started walking toward the exit. 10 years. That's how long I had been married to Marcus. I had shown up to every birthday, every graduation, every barbecue, always bringing a dish, helping set the table, cleaning up after everyone left. I thought if I kept showing up, they would eventually see me, accept me. And in a single moment, Sandra made it clear. To her, I was still the outsider, the help, the woman who married into the family but didn't belong in it. I walked toward the door with Maya's hand in mine, my chest tight and my eyes burning. I didn't want to cry in front of her. I didn't want her to remember this day like that. Then I heard the microphone click. Harold cleared his throat and said, "Actually, there's one thing I saved for last." When Harold's voice rang through the speakers, I stopped walking. My back was to the stage. Maya turned to look behind us, tugging on my hand. I could feel every pair of eyes in the room shift toward him, but I didn't move. He repeated himself, louder this time. "There's one thing I saved for last." I turned around slowly. Harold stood at the center of the stage, his shoulders squared, a small velvet box in one hand and something tucked under his arm. His expression was calm, but his voice had weight behind it. It was the voice he probably used when giving orders in burning buildings, a voice people listened to. He didn't look at Sandra. He didn't look at the crowd. His eyes were locked on mine. "Lena, can you come up here?" The room went quiet. I hesitated. Maya squeezed my hand again and whispered, "It's okay, Mommy. I'll go with you." We walked together to the front. Every step felt like walking across thin glass. I could hear the sound of silverware stopping mid-tap, heels shifting on the floor. I avoided Sandra's face, but I felt the heat of her stare burning through me. When we reached the edge of the stage, Harold bent down to Maya's level. His entire expression softened. "Hi there, Sparkplug," he said. "Would you stand with me while I talk to the grown-ups?" Maya smiled shyly and nodded. Harold stood and faced the room. "I've spent my life around people who believe that loyalty and love are proven through action, not blood," he began. "So I wanted to take a moment to talk about someone who has shown me that kind of love every single day for the last 10 years. I felt my throat tighten. My palms were damp. I hadn't expected any of this. Harold continued. "When Marcus brought Lena home, I'll admit I wasn't sure what to think. She was quiet, a little too polite. But I watched her. I watched how she loved my son, how she raised their daughter, how she showed up for everything without needing a spotlight or a thank you." He reached under his arm and pulled out the scrapbook. My scrapbook, the one I had given Marcus to pass along earlier, just before I tried to leave. "She gave me this today," Harold said. "It's filled with moments I forgot about, moments that mattered. There are drawings in here from Maya, photos of fishing trips, letters that reminded me of things I didn't know she noticed. This book is the most personal gift I've ever received. It came from someone who didn't owe me anything, but gave me everything." He turned to me. "I want everyone here to understand something. Family isn't defined by shared DNA. It's defined by loyalty, presence, and love. And this woman has shown me all three, more than most of the people in this room." He opened the velvet box. Inside was a ring, a delicate gold band with a small emerald in the center. I didn't recognize it, but it looked old, carefully kept. "This belonged to my mother," Harold said. "She wore it until the day she passed. She asked me to give it to the person I believed would carry on her spirit, someone who sees people, someone who heals instead of judges. I kept it for years, and today I know exactly who it belongs to." He held it out toward me. "Lena, you're my family, not by marriage, not by obligation, by choice, and no one in this room gets to tell you otherwise." The room was dead silent. My hands trembled as I reached out to take the ring. I looked up at Harold, unable to speak. The lump in my throat was too thick. I nodded. Maya leaned against my leg, holding the scrapbook like it was a trophy. Behind me, I could feel the mood in the room shifting. Some people looked shocked. Some looked awkward. A few smiled and clapped softly. I didn't look for Sandra. I didn't care what her face said anymore. In that moment, the weight I had carried for so long cracked. The feeling of not belonging, of shrinking myself to fit in, started to lift. It didn't vanish. It didn't disappear. But it started to break. And Harold made sure everyone knew the truth. I wasn't just part of this family. I was the heart of it. I stood beside Harold on that stage, the small gold ring cradled in my palm. The weight of it felt heavier than it looked. It wasn't just a piece of jewelry. It was a declaration, a correction of every moment I had been treated like I didn't matter. It was the answer to every silent prayer I had whispered while forcing a smile at dinner tables where I didn't belong. The applause started slowly, a few hands clapping tentatively. Then more joined in. It wasn't thunderous. It wasn't a standing ovation, but it was enough. Enough to make me feel like I wasn't invisible anymore. Enough to make my daughter beam as she looked up at me. Harold leaned over and said quietly, "That ring is yours now. Don't let anyone make you feel like you have to earn it." I nodded, still too overwhelmed to speak. I slipped it onto my finger. It fit perfectly, like it had been waiting for me all along. Sandra finally stood up from her chair. Her expression was unreadable. Part disbelief, part offense, part something else she couldn't quite mask. She took a step forward and opened her mouth as if to say something, but Harold held up his hand before she could speak. "We're not doing this today," he said clearly, his voice carrying across the room. "This is a celebration, not a contest. If anyone in this family has a problem with what I just said, they're welcome to leave." No one moved. Sandra hesitated for a moment, then slowly sat back down, her jaw tight and her eyes fixed on the floor. For the first time in 10 years, she was the one being quiet. Marcus stood up next. He crossed the room and came onto the stage. His eyes were on me, full of something between guilt and pride. "I should have said something earlier," he said, his voice low but steady. "You didn't deserve that. You never have. I'm sorry." I didn't respond right away, not because I was angry, but because I was trying to hold on to the moment Harold had given me. I wasn't going to let anything cloud that. "You don't need to apologize," I said finally. "Just start noticing when it matters." He nodded. It wasn't perfect, but it was something. Maya reached for the microphone. Harold smiled and knelt down to help her hold it. "My mommy made the book," she said proudly. "She said love is what makes a family, and Grandpa said it too. So now we're the same." Laughter broke through the tension. A few people clapped again, this time with more warmth. Harold kissed Maya on the head and took the mic back. "I think that's a perfect way to end the speeches," he said. People returned to their seats. The music started up again. A few guests came over to hug me, offer kind words, say they had never realized how much I did behind the scenes. One of Marcus's brothers even apologized for never speaking up before. Sandra kept her distance. She spoke to a few guests but didn't come near me again. I didn't need her to. For the rest of the afternoon, I stayed close to Maya and Harold. We took pictures. We danced. We laughed. I watched Harold flip through the scrapbook 3 more times before the evening ended. He ran his fingers over the drawings like they were glass, handled each page with care. Before we left, he pulled me aside. "You've been part of this family for years, Lena, but today I made sure no one could question it again." "Thank you," I said, my voice soft. He smiled. "You didn't need my approval. You already earned your place. I just wanted everyone else to know it." As we walked out of the hall and into the warm evening air, I looked down at the ring on my finger. It wasn't about wealth or status. It was a symbol that someone had finally seen me for who I truly was. Not a guest, not an outsider, but someone worth standing up for. And for the first time in 10 years, I didn't feel like I had to shrink myself to be accepted. I stood tall. I was home. Later that night, after we got home, I tucked Maya into bed. She was still glowing from the party, retelling everything to her stuffed animals as if it were the best day of her life. To her, it was. She didn't carry the weight I had carried. She didn't feel the rejection. She just saw her mom standing on a stage with her grandpa, being loved out loud. Once she was asleep, I sat on the edge of my bed and looked at the ring on my finger. I turned it slowly between my thumb and forefinger, remembering the way Harold had handed it to me, the steadiness in his voice, the way he had looked at me like he had been waiting to say those words for a long time. I didn't cry. I thought I might, but instead, I felt a stillness, a calm I hadn't known I needed. For years, I had tried to earn a seat at a table that was never set for me. I had smiled through cold silences, offered help when no one asked, showed up even when I was left off the guest list. I believed that if I gave enough, someone would eventually give something back. But what I learned that day was something different. I learned that you can't force belonging. You can't twist yourself into a shape that makes other people comfortable and expect it to feel like home. Belonging comes when someone sees you and welcomes you as you are. No conditions, no tests, no apologies. Harold saw me, not as Marcus's wife, not as the mother of his granddaughter, but as a person, a woman who had given her heart to a family that hadn't always earned it, a woman who kept showing up, not for approval, but because it was the right thing to do. He didn't just give me a ring. He gave me my place back. He gave me my name in a room where I had always been referred to as her or Marcus's wife. He called me Lena, in front of everyone, and he made sure they listened. In the days after the party, things shifted. Marcus started speaking up more. At dinner with his family, he made space for me in conversations instead of letting them talk around me. He stopped brushing off the small cuts I used to carry home, like splinters in my chest. I didn't need him to fight my battles, but I needed to know he saw them, that he finally understood they were real. Sandra didn't reach out, and honestly, I didn't expect her to. I wasn't waiting for an apology. I had spent too long hoping for kindness from someone who saw my existence as a threat, but her silence no longer felt like a wound. It felt like distance, and distance I could live with. Maya started wearing one of the necklaces from the party that another cousin had given her as a spare. She wore it with pride. "Because we're all family now," she said. I didn't correct her. She was right in the way that mattered. The scrapbook we made sits on Harold's mantel now. He told me he flips through it every Sunday morning. He said it reminds him that quiet love is sometimes the loudest, the kind that doesn't need announcements or decorations, just pages filled with proof that you were there, loving people the way they should be loved. I don't know what the future holds with the rest of the family. Some of them may still see me the way Sandra does. Some might never change. But I don't carry their opinions like armor anymore. I carry that ring. I carry my daughter's hand in mine. I carry the truth that Harold gave me in front of everyone, that I am not an afterthought, that I am not a guest in my own story, that I am, and always have been, real family, and from now on I walk like I believe it. If this story meant something to you, if you've ever felt like the outsider in your own family or had to fight just to be seen, I hope you know this. You are not alone. You don't have to prove your worth to people who refuse to see it. The right ones will never make you beg to belong. If you felt something watching this, please give this video a like. Share it with someone who might need to hear it today. Drop a comment below and tell me, have you ever had a moment where someone finally saw your value? I'd love to hear your story too. And if you want more true, heartfelt stories like this, don't forget to subscribe to the channel. We've built a space here where your voice, your experience, and your heart matter. Thanks for watching. And remember, sometimes the greatest strength is simply choosing to stay true to yourself.